Princess Margaret, a real royal rebel. With a two-part BBC documentary on the Queen's late sister starting next week, Jane Warren lifts the lid on her free-spirited lifestyle and how she saw her doomed romance with Peter Townsend as a lucky escape. The popular perception has always been that Princess Margaret, the original wild child of the royal family, was deeply upset at losing the stable, avuncular influence of Group Captain Peter Townsend after she was unable to marry the dashing divorce because both the Church of England and Parliament were firmly against the match. However, a new documentary suggests that far from feeling distraught about the marriage that never was, the Queen's sister viewed her inability to marry him as a lucky escape. In a forthcoming BBC documentary, Lady Jane Rayne, elder sister of the late Lady Annabel Goldsmith, believes that the princess, who died in 2002 at the age of 71, viewed her split from Townsend with more a sense of relief at not having to become an ordinary housewife. The extraordinary claim is made during a two-part program Princess Margaret, the Rebel Royal, starting on September 11. Margaret was just 16 when she fell in love with Townsend, a married man 16 years her senior who had worked as her late father King George VI's equerry since Margaret was 14. Clergy and politicians were against the relationship between the impressionable princess and the Battle of Britain war hero, but the public voiced support for Margaret's right to marry the man of her choice. When she was 21 her father died, her sister ascended the throne and Townsend divorced his wife. Early the following year he proposed to Margaret, who was forced to turn him down on the advice of her sister, now Queen Elizabeth II. Lady Jane, 85, who was one of the late princess's closest friends, recalls, "She looked as if she was absolutely heartbroken, but I don't think she was. I think she thought, right, go back to my bachelor days." She weighed up everything in her mind to realize what her life would have been like, had they married. For it was made clear to Margaret that if she had gone through with the marriage then she and any subsequent children would have been removed from the line of succession. This edict followed the political storm surrounding her uncle Edward VIII's abdication in 1936 in order to marry twice divorced American Wallis Simpson. "She would never be a nobody, but she would have lost part of her glamour," says Lady Jane. "I think if she'd married him, she would have been rather an ordinary housewife, and she didn't want that at all." According to former BBC royal correspondent Jenny Bond, this insight has been known to royal insiders for a while. But it is the first time the claims have been given such a high-profile platform. "The Goldsmiths were certainly very well connected to the royal family," says Bond. "I have no idea myself if the claims are true or not, but I have heard it said that some people had surmised that she certainly wasn't willing to give up her status, her title and her place in succession to the throne." So, who was the real Princess Margaret, a woman whose character combined the rebellious force of modernity and respect for tradition, and who in this way, according to the program makers, embodied the spirit of cultural change in the second half of the 20th century? Author Andrew Duncan remembers her well, and in this week's edition of Radio Times shares insights including the fact that far from being as imperious as her reputation suggested, she was rather more down to earth. They first met when she was 39 and in a difficult marriage to the photographer Anthony Armstrong Jones, the commoner she married on the rebound from Townsend and who was then given the title Earl of Snowdon. The volatile couple had a reputation as the black sheep of the family, but Duncan recalls being immediately charmed on meeting the princess nearly 50 years ago, when she was in her late 30s. "I found her then, and in all subsequent meetings, amusing, relaxed and helpful, not at all the allegedly imperious, controversial and mocked royal figure of popular imagination," he recalls. Having been met by her son Viscount Linley, then 8, who helped himself to a Coca-Cola with the words "I'm sorry she's keeping you waiting," Duncan was greeted by Margaret wearing an inexpensive orange dress. After warmly welcoming him, although we'd never met, she poured herself a gin and tonic, lit a cigarette in a black holder, and turned on the television. "Sit down," said the free-spirited royal, patting the sofa next to her. While claiming that she had never been imperious, she believed that her reputation as being wicked as hell was the natural counterpoint to her sister's goody-goody one, but in a telling aside admitted that she was an absolute wreck after some of the publicity she had received for her wayward ways. On the Queen, however, she was quite clear about her role. In my own humble way, I've always tried to take some of the burden off my sister. She can't do it all, you know, and I leap at the opportunity to help, she said. I'm enormously impressed when she walks into a room. It's a kind of magic. She's a pretty young woman, and the longer she's sovereign, the more her experience will affect decisions by prime ministers. Prescient words indeed.